The silent collapse, why pressure exposes the weak mind. There is a moment in every person's life when the mask falls off. Not when things are easy. Not when the money is flowing. Not when people are clapping for you. Not when the road is smooth, the sun is shining, and life feels kind. No. The real test of a human being begins when pressure enters the room. Pressure does something terrifying. It strips away the illusion. It tears off the performance. It removes the filters, the excuses, the borrowed confidence, the fake discipline, the rehearsed personality, and the carefully built image. And what remains is who you truly are. That is why most people fail under pressure. Not because they are stupid. Not because they are cursed. Not because life is unfair. But because pressure reveals what comfort was hiding. A weak mind can look strong in peaceful times. A distracted person can look confident when nothing is at stake. A coward can sound brave when there is no danger. An undisciplined person can pretend to be focused when the consequences are small. But the moment the clock starts ticking, the moment the eyes of the world are on them, the moment failure becomes visible, the moment pain becomes possible, the moment they must perform, decide, endure, or lead, they collapse. And the most dangerous part? Most people do not even understand why. They think they failed because of bad luck. They think they failed because the pressure was too much. They think they failed because others were better. They think they failed because the world is cruel. But the Stoics saw deeper. They understood a brutal truth that modern people spend their whole lives trying to avoid. Pressure does not destroy a man. It reveals him. Marcus Aurelius understood this. Epictetus taught it. Seneca warned about it. The fire does not invent weakness. It exposes what was already there. A sword tested in battle does not suddenly become weak in combat. It was weak all along. The battle simply made the weakness impossible to ignore. And this is why so many people fail. Because they build their lives for appearance, not for endurance. They train for applause, not adversity. They chase validation, not virtue. They want results, but not resistance. They want status, but not self-mastery. They want comfort, but still expect courage to appear on command. But courage does not appear on command. Calm does not appear on command. Discipline does not magically wake up because the situation is serious. Under pressure, you do not rise to your wishes. You fall to your level of training. That is the law of life. And most people are not trained. They are stimulated. They are distracted. They are emotionally reactive. They are addicted to comfort. They are controlled by fear. They are fragile beneath the surface. They are dependent on conditions being favorable. So when pressure arrives, their breathing changes. Their thoughts speed up. Their emotions become louder than reason. Their body enters panic. Their memory becomes unreliable. Their confidence evaporates. Their self-image starts cracking. Their decisions become impulsive. Their speech becomes uncertain. Their actions become clumsy. And then they call it bad performance. But it was never just performance. It was exposure. This is the hard truth that most people spend years avoiding. They do not fail because pressure is evil. They fail because they built no inner architecture strong enough to carry weight. A building that collapses in a storm was not betrayed by the storm. It was exposed by it. And if you understand that, truly understand it, your life can change forever. Because then you stop asking, why is life putting me under pressure? And you begin asking, why have I not prepared myself to remain steady when life inevitably does? That is the Stoic question. That is the question of a person who is ready to stop blaming the world and start mastering the self. Most people will never ask it. They will continue to live reactively. They will continue to seek easy pleasure. They will continue to confuse comfort with peace. They will continue to think confidence is something you say instead of something you earn. They will continue to think pressure is the enemy. But the Stoic knows better. Pressure is a mirror. And the mirror never lies. So if you have ever frozen when it mattered, If you have ever broken down in a critical moment, if you have ever watched yourself become smaller under stress, if you have ever regretted what you said, what you did, or what you failed to do when the stakes were high, this message is for you. Because failure under pressure is not your final identity. It is a diagnosis. It is information. It is a brutal but valuable revelation. It shows you exactly where the weakness lives. And once you know where the weakness lives, you can begin the work. Tonight we are going to go deep. We are going to uncover why most people fail under pressure. Not with shallow motivation. Not with cheap quotes. Not with empty self-help slogans. But with the cold, timeless, ruthless clarity of Stoic wisdom. You will understand why fear hijacks the mind. Why untrained emotions destroy performance. Why most people confuse confidence with comfort. Why panic is often a habit, not an accident. Why discipline matters more than talent in crisis. Why your identity collapses when it depends on outcomes. Why pressure is not the problem, attachment is. And how to become the rare person who stays calm while everyone else crumbles. Because in this world, the calm are rare. The composed are powerful. The disciplined are dangerous. And the one who can think clearly under pressure will always dominate the one who cannot. So listen carefully. Because what you are about to hear is not just philosophy. It is survival. It is strength. It is war training for the modern soul. And if you truly absorb it, the next time pressure enters your life, you will not collapse. You will become the storm. Pressure does not create weakness, it reveals it. Most people spend their entire lives misunderstanding pressure. They think pressure is something that attacks them from the outside. A cruel force. An unfair burden. A terrible interruption. But pressure is not the enemy. Pressure is the examiner. It is the force that reveals whether your inner world is built on truth or fantasy. Think about it. A person can claim they are patient, but let them be insulted publicly. A person can claim they are disciplined, but let them be tempted repeatedly when no one is watching. A person can claim they are brave, but let them face rejection, uncertainty, humiliation, or real loss. A person can claim they are calm, but let one unexpected crisis hit their phone at 2:13 a.m. Suddenly, the truth appears. This is what Stoicism teaches so clearly. Character is not what you say in comfort. Character is what remains when comfort is removed. And that is why most people fail. Because their identity is often built in environments that never truly test them. They look strong because the conditions are easy. They look wise because no one is challenging them. They look confident because the risk is low. They look emotionally stable because nothing meaningful is threatening them. But once pressure rises, all borrowed strength disappears. And this is important. Because many people are not actually strong. They are merely unprovoked. They are not calm. They are merely unstimulated. They are not disciplined. They are merely untempted. They are not courageous. They are merely untested. This distinction changes everything. The Stoics never judged themselves by how they felt in comfort. They judged themselves by how they responded to disruption. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up each day asking, "How can I feel good today?" He asked, "How can I remain virtuous, stable, and self-governed no matter what today brings?" That is a warrior's question. That is a ruler's question. That is a Stoic question. And modern people almost never ask it. Instead, they build a life around emotional convenience. They avoid hard conversations. They avoid silence. They avoid discomfort. They avoid criticism. They avoid discipline. They avoid uncertainty. They avoid loss. They avoid inner confrontation. And because they avoid all of these things, they never develop the capacity to withstand them. Then one day, life delivers pressure in full force. A breakup. A betrayal. A public failure. A business collapse. A family crisis. A health scare. A humiliating mistake. A moment where they must perform under scrutiny. A season where no one is coming to save them. And suddenly the nervous system goes into rebellion. Their heart races. Their thoughts fragment. Their words fail them. Their hands shake. Their confidence disappears. Their identity destabilizes. And they say, "I don't know what happened to me." But the Stoic answer is simple. Nothing happened to you that wasn't already inside you. Pressure simply brought it to the surface. This is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you up. Because the person who blames pressure stays weak. But the person who studies their reaction becomes powerful. Imagine two people standing in the same storm. One panics. One remains centered. Same storm. Different inner structure. This means the storm was never the full explanation. The difference was internal. One had prepared. One had trained. One had built emotional muscle. One had rehearsed adversity in the mind. One had detached from outcomes. One had practiced self-command. And the other had not. That is the entire game. The world is full of people trying to control external conditions so they never feel pressure. The Stoic does the opposite. He trains himself so deeply that pressure loses its power. He does not beg the world to become softer. He becomes harder to shake. He does not ask life to remove intensity. He increases his capacity. He does not seek a painless existence. He develops a stable center. That is why Stoicism is not merely philosophy. It is psychological armor. And if you want to understand why most people fail under pressure, you must first understand this. They do not fail in the moment. They fail in the years before the moment. They fail in the small compromises. They fail in the lazy habits. They fail in the addiction to ease. They fail in the emotional indulgence. They fail in the refusal to confront themselves. They fail in the avoidance of voluntary discomfort. They fail in the illusion that strength will magically appear when needed. But strength does not appear by magic. It is built in private. Calm is built in repetition. Courage is built in tiny acts of self-conquest. Discipline is built in the moments nobody applauds. And if you skip those moments, pressure will collect the debt later. This is why the Stoics practiced hardship voluntarily. They fasted. They endured discomfort. They reflected on loss. They visualized disaster. They restrained impulses. They controlled speech. They trained perception. Not because they loved suffering, but because they understood a law most people ignore. The pain you refuse in training returns multiplied in reality. That is why most people break. Because they refuse small discomforts, then collapse under great ones. They avoid difficult conversations, then lose relationships. They avoid disciplined routines, then lose control of their mind. They avoid silence, then become strangers to themselves. They avoid emotional restraint, then become prisoners of mood. They avoid preparation, then panic in performance. They avoid responsibility, then resent consequences. And then they call life unfair. But life is often just honest. Pressure is honest. It reveals whether your mind is a palace or a ruin. And the beautiful thing is this. Once you stop taking pressure personally, you can start using it. Every stressful moment becomes feedback. Every trigger becomes information. Every breakdown becomes a map. Every moment of panic points directly to an untrained area of the self. That is powerful. Because now failure is not the end. It is instruction. You freeze in conflict? Then your relationship with confrontation needs training. You crumble under judgment? Then your identity is too attached to external approval. You panic when uncertain? Then you have not practiced surrendering control. You lose focus when stakes rise? Then your nervous system has not been trained to stay steady in intensity. This is why self-awareness is more valuable than ego. Ego says, "I shouldn't feel this." Wisdom says, "What is this feeling teaching me about my current level of mastery?" The Stoic always chooses wisdom. Because the Stoic is not interested in pretending to be strong. He is interested in becoming strong. And becoming strong requires honesty. Brutal honesty. Not self-hatred. Not shame. Not dramatic self-pity. Just truth. The truth that under pressure, you met the version of yourself you have actually trained. Not the version you imagined. Not the version you posted. Not the version you talked about. The version you built. And if you do not like what you saw, good. That is the beginning. Because now the illusion is dead. And where illusion dies, transformation begins. Most people are addicted to comfort, so pressure feels like death. One of the deepest reasons most people fail under pressure is simple. They have become addicted to comfort. Not just physical comfort. Mental comfort. Emotional comfort. Social comfort. Predictable comfort. Digital comfort. Routine comfort. Validation comfort. Escape comfort. And once a person becomes addicted to comfort, any form of pressure feels like violence. This is one of the great hidden diseases of modern life. People think they are exhausted because life is too hard. But often, they are exhausted because they have trained themselves to be intolerant of difficulty. They have lost their capacity for friction. They cannot sit in silence without reaching for stimulation. They cannot feel discomfort without demanding relief. They cannot be misunderstood without becoming emotionally unstable. They cannot wait without irritation. They cannot lose without identity collapse. They cannot be criticized without defensiveness. They cannot be uncertain without panic. And when such a person meets pressure, it feels unbearable. Why? Because they have built a nervous system that expects immediate soothing. Think about the average person today. The moment they feel bored, they scroll. The moment they feel anxious, they distract. The moment they feel lonely, they seek validation. The moment they feel discomfort, they seek escape. The moment they feel challenged, they procrastinate. The moment they feel exposed, they retreat. This constant self-soothing creates fragility. It teaches the body and mind a dangerous lesson. Whenever discomfort appears, run. And that lesson becomes automatic. So when real pressure arrives, the system obeys its training. Run. Avoid. Escape. Delay. Defend. Blame. Collapse. This is why pressure is not just a mental event. It is a conditioning event. You are not simply dealing with the current moment. You are dealing with every pattern your body has rehearsed for years. If you have trained yourself to escape discomfort, pressure will feel like suffocation. But if you have trained yourself to endure discomfort, pressure becomes familiar. This is why Stoicism is so powerful. It reverses the conditioning. It teaches you not to worship comfort. It teaches you to become larger than your cravings. It teaches you to stop treating every unpleasant feeling like an emergency. That alone changes a person's life. Because most people do not fail under pressure because the situation is impossible. They fail because the sensation of discomfort becomes so intolerable that they abandon reason. They confuse intensity with danger. They feel stress and instantly assume, "This is bad. I must stop. I must escape. I cannot handle this." But the Stoic learns to say, "This is uncomfortable, yes. But discomfort is not destruction." That is a revolutionary sentence. Discomfort is not destruction. Pressure is not proof that you are weak. Pressure is an invitation to strengthen. But comfort addiction makes that impossible to see. A comfort-addicted mind interprets every challenge as a threat to identity. And this is why so many people sabotage themselves right before breakthrough. Right before the big interview, they panic. Right before the important conversation, they avoid it. Right before the opportunity, they procrastinate. Right before the test, they mentally spiral. Right before the leap, they self-doubt. Right before the moment that could change their life, they retreat. Why? Because growth requires tension. And a comfort-addicted mind fears tension more than it desires success. That is tragic. Imagine wanting greatness, but being unable to tolerate the emotional climate required to reach it. That is the silent prison of millions. They want the reward, but they are allergic to the path. They want confidence, but avoid exposure. They want resilience, but avoid resistance. They want respect, but avoid responsibility. They want peace, but avoid discipline. They want transformation, but avoid discomfort. And so they remain the same. Then they wonder why pressure destroys them. But pressure only destroys what comfort has weakened. This is why the Stoics deliberately entered discomfort. Not to punish themselves. To free themselves. When you choose discomfort voluntarily, something profound happens. You stop being its victim. Cold water. Fasting. Silence. Difficult work. Restraint. Delayed gratification. Hard conversations. Saying no. Waking early. Holding posture in stress. Breathing through anxiety. Remaining composed while triggered. These are not random acts. They are acts of liberation. Every time you endure discomfort without escaping, you send a new message to the nervous system. I can survive this. And eventually, I can master this. Then one day, when pressure comes, you do not panic the way you used to. Because the body remembers. The mind remembers. The soul remembers. You have been here before. Maybe not in the exact situation, but in the exact sensation. That is the secret. Most people fail because the feeling of pressure is unfamiliar. The Stoic succeeds because the feeling of pressure has been rehearsed. He has practiced remaining still in internal storms. He has learned not to obey every emotional command. He has learned to separate sensation from meaning. Just because his chest is tight does not mean he is in danger. Just because his thoughts are loud does not mean they are true. Just because his emotions are intense does not mean they deserve control. This is mastery. And without this mastery, pressure will always feel bigger than it is. The world does not have to crush you. Your own avoidance has already done half the work. That is why the first step in becoming strong under pressure is not confidence. It is detoxing from comfort. Stop needing ease to function. Stop needing praise to continue. Stop needing certainty to move. Stop needing the mood to be right. Stop needing life to feel gentle before you act with courage. Because the people who dominate under pressure are not superhuman. They are simply less dependent on comfort. They can think in discomfort. They can breathe in discomfort. They can decide in discomfort. They can perform in discomfort. They can remain ethical in discomfort. They can stay focused in discomfort. They can lead in discomfort. That is power. And it is rare. Because most people are soft where they should be forged. They have entertained themselves into weakness. They have numbed themselves into fragility. They have comforted themselves into collapse. And then they call pressure the villain. But the villain was never pressure. The villain was the life built around avoiding it. Fear of judgment makes people break in public. There is a specific kind of pressure that destroys more people than physical pain. It is not hunger. It is not exhaustion. It is not even uncertainty. It is the fear of being seen failing. This is one of the most powerful reasons most people fail under pressure. They are not just afraid of difficulty. They are afraid of humiliation. They are afraid of what people will think. They are afraid of looking weak. They are afraid of making mistakes in public. They are afraid of being laughed at. They are afraid of being rejected. They are afraid of disappointing others. They are afraid of not matching the image they created. And this fear is enough to make intelligent people act foolishly. Because once your attention shifts from the task to the audience, your power disappears. Most people believe pressure comes from the event, the interview, the speech, the confrontation, the competition, the deadline, the public mistake, the risk. But very often, the real pressure is not the event itself. The real pressure is the audience, the invisible crowd in the mind, the imagined faces, the anticipated criticism, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of not looking impressive, the fear of losing respect, the fear of failing where others can see it, the fear of not being enough in front of witnesses. And this fear is one of the most dangerous emotional poisons a person can carry. Because once you become obsessed with how you are being perceived, you stop being present. You stop being grounded. You stop being effective. And the moment your mind leaves the task to manage your image, you begin to fall apart. That is why so many people fail under pressure. Not because they lack ability, but because they are performing for approval instead of acting from principle. This is where Stoic wisdom cuts deep. Because the Stoics understood something modern people forget every single day. The more your peace depends on other people's opinions, the more fragile you become. And fragility is always exposed under pressure. The crowd in your head is often more dangerous than reality. There is a strange and painful thing that happens to people under pressure. The moment the stakes rise, they stop dealing with reality, and they start dealing with imagination. This is the beginning of collapse. Imagine a man walking into a room to speak. Before he even says a word, his mind begins attacking him. What if they think I sound stupid? What if I forget what to say? What if I freeze? What if they notice my nervousness? What if I embarrass myself? What if they judge me forever? What if this ruins my image? What if I fail in front of everyone? Notice what is happening. He is not fighting the room. He is fighting mental ghosts. He is not responding to facts. He is reacting to projected humiliation. And this is why pressure becomes overwhelming. Because the mind is no longer carrying one burden. It is carrying dozens. The task, the fear, the self-monitoring, the imagined reactions, the catastrophic predictions, the emotional shame, the need to appear confident, the need to protect identity. This is too much for most people. And so they break. Not because the task was impossible, but because the ego made it heavier than it needed to be. This is one of the greatest Stoic lessons of all. We do not merely suffer from events. We suffer from the stories we attach to events. A public moment is just a public moment. A mistake is just a mistake. A pause is just a pause. A rejection is just a rejection. But the mind says, no. This is humiliation. This is proof I'm not enough. This is a disaster. This is a wound to my identity. This is social death. And once the mind interprets ordinary discomfort as identity destruction, the body responds like it is under attack. Heart racing, hands shaking, breath shortening, voice tightening, thoughts scattering, memory weakening, muscles tensing, vision narrowing. This is why people who are highly talented still fail in big moments. Their skill is present, but their self-consciousness is louder. They are no longer in the moment. They are outside themselves, watching themselves. And self-observation under fear is a prison. When you become too aware of yourself in a pressured moment, you lose your natural flow. You start managing every word, every movement, every facial expression, every pause, every mistake, every reaction from others. That is exhausting. And that exhaustion creates performance collapse. This is why the Stoics taught detachment from external judgment. Not because they hated people. Not because they were antisocial. But because they knew that the moment your identity depends on public approval, you become easy to control. If people can disturb your mind with their opinions, then they own a piece of your inner world. And most people live like this every day. They speak carefully so they won't be disliked. They dress for validation. They hide truth to avoid criticism. They suppress ideas to avoid ridicule. They delay action to avoid failure being seen. They choose mediocrity because it is safer than visible risk. Then they wonder why they feel weak. Because a person who lives for approval is always carrying invisible chains. And under pressure, those chains tighten. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He constantly reminded himself that the opinions of others are unstable, shallow, and temporary. The same people who praise you today may insult you tomorrow. The same crowd that applauds success may disappear in failure. The same mouths that admire confidence may attack vulnerability. Why surrender your peace to such instability? Why build your self-worth on a foundation made of other people's moods? That is madness. Yet millions do it. And the result is predictable. When pressure rises, they do not ask, "What is the right thing to do?" They ask, "How will this make me look?" That question destroys strength. Because strength requires direct contact with reality. But vanity pulls you away from reality. It makes you more loyal to image than truth. And when image matters more than truth, you will always be fragile. Because truth can survive pressure. Image cannot. This is why so many people crack in public moments. Not because they are incapable, but because they are trying to protect a version of themselves. The smart one. The confident one. The strong one. The successful one. The respected one. The perfect one. And when reality threatens that image, panic begins. Because the ego does not fear pain as much as it fears exposure. Read that carefully. The ego does not fear pain as much as it fears exposure. It would rather stay small than be seen struggling. It would rather avoid than look uncertain. It would rather procrastinate than risk visible imperfection. It would rather remain silent than sound unpolished. It would rather pretend than be real. This is why many people are not truly afraid of failure. They are afraid of witnessed failure. And that distinction changes everything. Because once you understand that, you realize the real battle is not external. It is internal. The battle is not, "How do I stop people from judging me?" The battle is, "How do I stop making their judgment the measure of my worth?" That is the Stoic path. Not controlling the crowd. Controlling your interpretation of the crowd. Because no matter how disciplined you become, people will still judge. They judged great men. They judged wise men. They judged leaders. They judged artists. They judged philosophers. They judged the brave. They judged the honest. They judged the misunderstood. They judged the excellent. So the goal is not to become unjudged. That is impossible. The goal is to become unruled by judgment. That is freedom. And freedom under pressure is rare. Because most people enter important moments carrying an audience in their nervous system. They can feel the eyes. They can hear the criticism before it exists. They can imagine the embarrassment before it happens. They can taste the shame before the event even begins, and all of that drains power. This is why Stoicism teaches the discipline of perception. Before the event, ask yourself, what is actually happening? What am I adding to it? What am I assuming? What imagined humiliation am I worshipping? What opinion am I fearing? Why am I giving strangers power over my breath, my body, and my mind? That question alone can save you. Because the crowd in your head is often far more cruel than the real crowd in front of you. Most people forget your mistakes faster than you do. Most people are not watching as closely as your fear suggests. And even if they are, so what? That is the Stoic blow. So what? Will their opinion change the truth of your effort? Will their laughter erase your courage? Will their misunderstanding cancel your growth? Will their mockery define your future? Will their rejection destroy your character? No. Only if you let it. And that is why fear of judgment is such a deadly form of pressure. It is self-inflicted tyranny. It makes a free person behave like a prisoner. But the moment you stop worshipping perception, a new strength appears. You breathe differently. You speak more honestly. You move more naturally. You recover from mistakes faster. You stop overcorrecting. You stop mentally spiraling. You stop trying to look perfect. You become harder to shake. And that is when pressure begins to lose its grip. Because now, you are no longer performing for the crowd. You are acting from center. And a centered person is dangerous. There is a kind of fear that does not scream. It paralyzes. It does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like silence. A blank mind. A stiff body. A delayed response. A lost sentence. A forgotten idea. A weak handshake. A nervous laugh. A sudden desire to escape. This is the freeze response. And many people experience it the moment attention turns toward them. Not because they are weak in essence, but because they have linked visibility with danger. That is one of the most important things to understand. Some people are not afraid of the task. They are afraid of being seen doing the task. That is why they can perform well alone, but collapse in front of others. They can rehearse powerfully in private, then stumble in public. They can think clearly by themselves, then become mentally foggy in a room full of eyes. They can explain brilliantly to a friend, then sound uncertain in front of a crowd. Why? Because the nervous system has associated attention with threat. The body interprets visibility as exposure, exposure as danger, danger as survival risk. And once that happens, rational thought starts shutting down. This is not just philosophy. It is deeply biological. When the body feels socially threatened, it can trigger ancient survival mechanisms. To modern people, embarrassment feels small. But to the nervous system, public rejection can feel primal. For most of human history, exclusion from the tribe was serious. So the body still reacts intensely to social exposure. That is why your chest tightens before speaking. That is why your mouth dries up in confrontation. That is why your thoughts scatter during judgment. That is why your confidence collapses under scrutiny. Your system is not only reacting to the moment, it is reacting to old survival coding. But here is where most people go wrong. They interpret that reaction as proof they are not capable. They say, I froze, so I'm not good enough. I got nervous, so I'm not built for this. I stumbled, so I must not be confident. I felt pressure, so I'm weak. No. Feeling pressure is not proof of weakness. Obeying pressure blindly is what keeps weakness alive. The Stoic does not panic because the body reacts. The Stoic observes the reaction without surrendering identity to it. That is mastery. You feel the racing heart, and still stand. You feel the dry mouth, and still speak. You feel the shaking hands, and still act. You feel the self-doubt, and still proceed. You feel the heat of judgment, and still remain truthful. That is courage. Not the absence of sensation, but the refusal to let sensation rule action. Most people think courage means feeling calm first. That is why they wait forever. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until the fear disappears. They wait until the anxiety is gone. They wait until they are fully confident. They wait until the body is relaxed. And while they wait, life moves on without them. The Stoic does not wait for the body to become comfortable. He teaches the body, through repeated exposure, that discomfort is survivable. This is how freezing is defeated. Not by theory alone, but by retraining the nervous system. You step into visibility again. And again. And again. And again. You speak while imperfect. You act while nervous. You remain present while watched. You let yourself be seen trying. You allow mistakes. You stop making embarrassment sacred. And slowly the body learns. I am not dying here. That is a life-changing lesson. Because every time you survive a visible imperfection, you weaken the old fear. Every time you continue after stumbling, you reclaim power. Every time you stop running from attention, you become more dangerous under pressure. This is why exposure is medicine. The thing you avoid becomes the thing that owns you. If you avoid being seen, visibility becomes terror. If you avoid criticism, feedback becomes injury. If you avoid public risk, performance becomes panic. If you avoid confrontation, truth becomes suffocation. This is why Stoic training often feels uncomfortable. Because it asks you to stop building your life around what your ego finds safe. It asks you to stop hiding from friction. It asks you to become familiar with the sensations you once feared. The modern mind wants to feel safe first. The Stoic mind becomes safe through practice. That difference changes destiny. Many people fail under pressure because they are trying to avoid ever feeling exposed. But life will expose you anyway. In relationships, In work. In leadership. In creativity. In parenting. In business. In loss. In conflict. In ambition. So you can either be exposed by life unexpectedly, or train exposure voluntarily. The wise choose the second. Imagine a man who fears public speaking. Every time he avoids it, he feels temporary relief. But that relief is expensive. Because what did he teach himself? He taught himself. Speaking in public is so dangerous that escape was necessary. So the fear grows. Now imagine the opposite. He speaks, even if badly. He survives the discomfort. He realizes people did not destroy him. He feels embarrassed, but remains alive, intact, learning. The next time, the body remembers. Still uncomfortable. But less terrifying. Then less. Then less. This is how confidence is built. Not through affirmations. Through survived reality. The Stoics knew this in spirit, even if they used different language. They knew that avoidance strengthens fear, and deliberate encounter weakens it. So when all eyes are on you, and you feel the freeze response rising, remember this. You are not being punished. You are being presented with a doorway. A doorway into a stronger self. If you run, the old self survives. If you remain, the old self starts to die. And that death is beautiful. Because the person who once needed perfect conditions begins to disappear. The person who once feared being seen begins to dissolve. The person who once equated discomfort with danger begins to transform. And in their place emerges someone far more powerful. Someone who can be visible without collapsing. Someone who can be judged without losing center. Someone who can feel fear without becoming it. Someone who can be imperfect in public and still continue. That person is rare. And rare people are hard to defeat. There is a dark truth most people never admit. They do not always avoid failure. Sometimes, they avoid witnessed effort. That is even deeper. Many people would rather quietly sabotage themselves than openly try and be seen struggling. They would rather procrastinate in private than attempt something meaningful and risk looking average. They would rather tell themselves, I could have done it if I really tried, than fully try and discover their current limits. This is the ego's favorite trap. It protects identity by preventing honest exposure. And this is why so many talented people never become powerful. Because their ego is more committed to looking capable than becoming capable. That sentence alone can change a life. The ego often prefers the image of potential over the reality of disciplined growth. Potential is flattering. Growth is humbling. Potential lets you fantasize. Growth forces you to confront your present weakness. Potential keeps your self-image untouched. Growth scratches the surface, exposes the cracks, and demands reconstruction. And reconstruction is painful. This is why people hide. Not always physically. Sometimes emotionally. Sometimes professionally. Sometimes creatively. Sometimes spiritually. They hide behind excuses. They hide behind delay. They hide behind perfectionism. They hide behind overthinking. They hide behind endless planning. They hide behind. Not yet. They hide behind. I'm waiting for the right time. They hide behind. I need more confidence first. But underneath all of it, there is often one fear. What if they see me trying, and I'm not as good as they think? That fear destroys momentum. Because once you need to protect your image, you stop engaging honestly with the process. You no longer ask, what do I need to learn? You ask, how do I avoid looking weak while learning? That question creates paralysis. Because learning is inherently awkward. Mastery begins ugly. Every powerful person was once visibly unpolished. Every speaker once stumbled. Every writer once wrote badly. Every leader once hesitated. Every athlete once looked clumsy. Every creator once made embarrassing work. Every thinker once said something incomplete. Every entrepreneur once looked foolish. But they kept going. Why? Because they valued truth over vanity. They valued becoming over appearing. They valued discipline over ego comfort. And that is why they grew. Most people do the opposite. They become trapped in self-image maintenance. They do not post because it might not be perfect. They do not speak because it might sound awkward. They do not start because beginners look messy. They do not lead because leaders are criticized. They do not create because creators can be rejected. They do not apply because applicants can be denied. They do not confess because honesty can be vulnerable. So what happens? Life passes. Not because they lack talent, but because they worshipped image. And image is a cruel god. It demands silence where courage is needed. It demands delay where action is required. It demands polish where honesty would be more useful. It demands protection where exposure would bring growth. This is why Stoicism is such a powerful antidote. Because Stoicism attacks the ego at its root. It asks, why are you so concerned with appearance? Why do you treat judgment as fatal? Why do you fear being seen in process? Why do you think dignity comes from perfection instead of principle? Why are you loyal to a mask that collapses under reality? Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself. You do not control what people think. You do not control how they interpret you. You do not control what stories they tell about you. So why build your life around controlling what cannot be controlled? That is wasted life. And wasted life becomes regret. Imagine being 50, 60, 70 years old, and realizing the reason you never became who you could have been was not lack of opportunity, not lack of intelligence, not lack of time, but fear of being seen imperfectly. That is heartbreaking, because it means the prison door was never locked from the outside. It was locked from within. This is why some people secretly choose failure. Not consciously, but psychologically. If they never fully commit, they can always preserve the fantasy. If I had really tried, I would have succeeded. That lie comforts the ego, but it starves the soul. The soul does not want protected potential. The soul wants honest engagement. It wants the full risk, the full effort, the full embarrassment, the full exposure, the full learning, the full transformation. Because only then do you become real. And reality is where strength lives. The Stoic would rather be truly growing and publicly imperfect than privately stagnant and secretly proud. That is wisdom. Because what is the point of appearing strong? If pressure can still break you? What is the point of seeming confident? If judgment still controls your breath? What is the point of protecting your image? If your inner world is ruled by fear? That is not power. That is decoration. And decoration falls apart in storms. This is why you must learn to make peace with visible imperfection. You must become willing to be seen learning, seen adjusting, seen failing, seen recovering, seen trying again, seen unfinished. That is how real confidence is born. Not from looking flawless, but from surviving flaws without self-destruction. The person who can be imperfect in public and remain composed has already escaped a massive prison, because now their energy is no longer being wasted on self-protection. It can finally be invested in mastery. That is why they rise faster. While others are editing their image, they are building substance. While others are hiding weakness, they are training weakness. While others are protecting potential, they are converting potential into power. And under pressure, substance always outperforms image. Always. There is a kind of weakness that hides behind politeness, charm, and social intelligence. It often looks normal. Sometimes it even looks admirable. But under pressure, it becomes a liability. It is the addiction to approval. Not simple kindness. Not healthy connection. Not respect for others. But emotional dependence on being liked. This is one of the most invisible reasons people fail under pressure. Because when you need approval to feel stable, you become divided inside. Part of you wants to do what is right. Another part of you wants to avoid upsetting anyone. Part of you wants to speak honestly. Another part wants to remain acceptable. Part of you wants to act decisively. Another part wants everyone to approve of the decision. That internal split weakens action, and pressure magnifies the split. When stakes are low, approval addiction can hide. You can still function. But when the moment becomes intense, that hidden dependency starts sabotaging you. In conflict, you soften truth. In leadership, you hesitate. In performance, you overthink. In negotiation, you settle too quickly. In relationships, you tolerate disrespect. In business, you undercharge. In public speaking, you become overly self-conscious. In creative work, you dilute your message. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, the mind is asking, will they still like me? That question is poison under pressure, because it replaces clarity with social survival. The Stoics understood that approval is one of the most dangerous addictions because it feels innocent. People say, I just want peace. I don't like conflict. I want everyone to be happy. I don't want to be misunderstood. But often, beneath those phrases is fear. Fear of disapproval. Fear of rejection. Fear of being the villain in someone else's story. And once you fear being disliked more than you value truth, you become manipulable. This is exactly why manipulators thrive around approval-hungry people. They know your weakness. They know you will betray yourself to preserve harmony. They know you will over-explain. They know you will apologize for boundaries. They know you will doubt your instincts. They know you will hesitate to confront. They know you will prioritize being good over being grounded. And under pressure, they win. Not because they are stronger, but because you are internally divided. A divided mind cannot be powerful. A divided mind leaks energy. It cannot fully commit. It cannot fully speak. It cannot fully act. It cannot fully hold the line. It cannot fully withstand pressure. That is why Stoicism teaches indifference to praise and blame. Not emotional numbness, but inner sovereignty. The Stoic asks, is this action virtuous? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it within my control? Is it aligned with reason and character? If yes, then the opinions of others become secondary. That is not cruelty. That is maturity. Because a mature person understands something most people resist. Sometimes doing the right thing will make you unpopular. Sometimes telling the truth will cost you admiration. Sometimes setting a boundary will invite resentment. Sometimes choosing yourself will disappoint people who benefited from your self-neglect. Sometimes leadership will offend the insecure. Sometimes calm confidence will trigger those who rely on your weakness. And if your peace depends on universal approval, you will betray yourself every time. That is why approval addiction makes people collapse under pressure. Because pressure often demands a decision that not everyone will like. And if you cannot tolerate disapproval, you will hesitate until the moment is lost. You will over-explain until your authority weakens. You will self-censor until your truth disappears. You will compromise until your position becomes hollow. You will perform instead of lead. This is especially dangerous for people who appear nice, because the world often rewards people-pleasing early in life. You get praise for being agreeable, praise for being easy, praise for not causing problems, praise for being accommodating, praised for making others comfortable. And so you build an identity around being well-received. Then one day, life demands steel. A difficult conversation. A hard no. A public stand. A painful truth. A risky move. A necessary conflict. And suddenly, the nervous system panics. Because your identity says, if they dislike me, I am unsafe. That is the real problem. Not just that you want approval, but that you have confused approval with safety. The Stoic breaks this illusion. He trains himself to understand. Disapproval is not death. Discomfort is not danger. Criticism is not collapse. Misunderstanding is not annihilation. You can survive being disliked. You can survive being misjudged. You can survive not being applauded. And once you truly know that, a tremendous strength appears. You stop begging to be accepted. You stop editing yourself to fit weak expectations. You stop shrinking to remain digestible. You stop betraying truth for temporary peace. And under pressure, that changes everything. Because now, when the moment comes, you are not fighting two battles. You are not fighting the task and the audience. You are not fighting the decision and the fear of disapproval. You are not fighting truth and the desire to be liked. You are simply acting. Cleanly. Clearly. Powerfully. That is rare. And rare people command the room without shouting. One of the greatest lies fear tells is this: if they judge me, something terrible has happened. But the Stoics would ask, what exactly has happened? Did your character disappear? Did your principles vanish? Did your discipline evaporate? Did your soul become smaller? Did truth stop being true? Or did someone merely form an opinion? That distinction is liberation. Because most people treat opinion like injury. They feel misunderstood and call it damage. They feel criticized and call it defeat. They feel rejected and call it destruction. But opinion is not injury unless you internalize it as identity. A person can insult you, but they cannot make you lesser. A person can mock your effort, but they cannot erase your courage. A person can misunderstand your motives, but they cannot rewrite your integrity. A person can reject your value, but they cannot determine your worth. Unless you hand them that authority. And that is exactly what most people do. They take a passing judgment and turn it into self-definition. One comment becomes a wound. One laugh becomes shame. One rejection becomes, I'm not enough. One mistake becomes, I'm a failure. One public stumble becomes, I can't handle pressure. This is why the Stoic guards interpretation so fiercely. Because interpretation is the gatekeeper of suffering. The event matters. But the meaning you assign to the event matters even more. If someone criticizes you and you say, this proves I'm worthless, you suffer deeply. If someone criticizes you and you say, this is data, maybe useful, maybe not, you remain stable. Same event. Different ruler of the mind. This is why Stoicism is not passive. It is active psychological governance. It teaches you to intercept meaning before it becomes misery. When judgment comes, pause. Ask, is this true? Is part of it true? Is it false? Is it useful? Is it noise? Why am I reacting so strongly? What am I protecting? What identity feels threatened? Why does this opinion seem more powerful than my own reason? These questions restore sovereignty. And sovereignty is the opposite of pressure collapse. The person who collapses under pressure is often not losing to the event. They are losing control of interpretation. They are deciding unconsciously. This moment means I am in danger. This mistake means I am exposed. This judgment means I am diminished. This criticism means I am not enough. The Stoic interrupts that entire chain. He says, no. This moment is only what it is. I will decide what meaning it carries. That is power. And that power can be trained. Most people fail under pressure because they are not just facing the moment. They are facing the fear of being seen in the moment. They are carrying the burden of image. The burden of approval. The burden of embarrassment. The burden of social comparison. The burden of imagined humiliation. The burden of protecting identity. That is too much weight. And under pressure, that weight crushes them. But the Stoic chooses another path. He does not try to become invisible. He becomes unrolled. He stops needing the crowd to confirm his worth. He stops making judgment sacred. He stops worshipping perception. He stops hiding from visible imperfection. He stops confusing disapproval with danger. He stops protecting an image and starts building a self. And once that happens, something changes. He can speak while nervous. He can act while watched. He can lead while criticized. He can stand while misunderstood. He can continue while imperfect. He can remain steady while others panic. This is why the person who no longer fears judgment becomes incredibly dangerous. Because now pressure has lost one of its strongest weapons. The crowd no longer owns his nervous system. The audience no longer dictates his breath. The eyes of others no longer define his center. And a person who can remain centered while being watched will outperform the talented person who still needs approval. Every time. There is a painful truth that many intelligent people discover too late. Being smart is not enough. Being talented is not enough. Being informed is not enough. Being experienced is not enough. Being prepared on paper is not enough. Because under pressure, knowledge can vanish. Words can disappear. Logic can weaken. Memory can fragment. Judgment can distort. Skill can become unstable. Confidence can evaporate. And in those moments, many people ask the wrong question. They ask, why did I suddenly become stupid? But the truth is not that they became stupid. The truth is that their emotions became louder than their intelligence. This is one of the deepest reasons most people fail under pressure. Not because they lack answers, but because the inner storm becomes so strong that the mind loses command. This is why a person can know exactly what to do and still do the wrong thing. Why a person can rehearse perfectly in private and still collapse in public. Why a person can be wise in calm moments and reckless in stressful ones. Why a person can understand discipline and still betray themselves under emotional intensity. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it scientific language. They knew that an ungoverned emotional life makes a person unreliable under stress. Not evil. Not hopeless. Just unstable. And instability under pressure is dangerous. Because when emotion seize the throne, reason becomes a prisoner. Tonight we go deeper. We will uncover why emotions hijack intelligence under pressure. Why the body can overpower the mind. Why fear can distort reality. Why panic can destroy good judgment. Why anger can make smart people foolish. Why emotional urgency can sabotage your future in seconds. And how Stoic training can help you become the rare person who remains clear when everyone else is drowning in internal noise. Because in the end, the person who can think clearly under emotional fire will always outperform the person who merely knows more. One of the most dangerous illusions people carry is this. They believe they are fully in control of themselves. They assume that if the moment becomes difficult, they will simply stay calm. They imagine they will think rationally, respond wisely, speak clearly, act intentionally, hold steady. But then pressure arrives. And suddenly, something else takes over. The heart begins pounding. The breath becomes shallow. The chest tightens. The stomach turns. The jaw clenches. The hands shake. The thoughts speed up. The focus narrows. The body becomes tense. The mind begins spiraling. And before logic can fully enter the room, the nervous system has already made its move. This is why so many people feel betrayed by themselves in high-pressure moments. They think, I know better than this. Why am I reacting like this? Why can't I think straight? Why am I panicking when I know what to do? Why is my body acting like I'm in danger? Because under pressure, the body often speaks before the mind. That truth alone can save a person years of confusion. You are not always failing because you lack knowledge. Sometimes you are failing because your nervous system has not been trained to stay regulated when intensity rises. And if the body becomes dysregulated, the mind becomes compromised. This is why Stoicism is not just about positive thinking. It is about physiological discipline. It is about learning to remain internally ordered when the body is screaming urgency. That is rare. Because most people are unconsciously obedient to bodily sensation. If the chest tightens, they assume something is wrong. If anxiety rises, they assume they are not ready. If adrenaline surges, they assume they should stop. If discomfort appears, they assume danger is near. But the Stoic learns a more powerful distinction. A sensation is not a command. Your heart racing is not a command to retreat. Your fear is not a command to surrender. Your tension is not a command to panic. Your anger is not a command to attack. Your shame is not a command to hide. Your sadness is not a command to collapse. This is what separates the weak from the strong under pressure. The weak interpret emotion as instruction. The strong observe emotion as information. That is a profound difference. If emotion is instruction, you become a servant. If emotion is information, you remain the ruler. And under pressure, rulership matters. Because the body can produce intense signals that feel absolute. A racing heart feels like danger. A tight throat feels like incapacity. A flushed face feels like exposure. A knot in the stomach feels like doom. But often, these sensations are not evidence of actual catastrophe. They are evidence of activation. Your system is activated. That is all. But because most people are not trained to distinguish activation from destruction, they spiral. They say, "I'm overwhelmed. I can't handle this. This is too much. I'm losing control. I need to escape." And then the escape itself confirms the fear. This is how emotional hijacking becomes a cycle. Pressure comes. The body activates. The mind misinterprets activation as danger. Fear increases. The body activates more. The person escapes or reacts impulsively. The nervous system learns, "Yes, that really was dangerous." So next time, the reaction comes faster, stronger, more automatic. This is why many people become worse under pressure over time instead of better. Because they are rehearsing panic. They are practicing collapse. They are strengthening emotional obedience. Every time they run from the feeling, they teach the body that the feeling is unbearable. But the Stoic does something radical. He stays. Not recklessly. Not self-destructively. But deliberately. He notices the activation, and remains. He feels the pounding heart, and breathes deeper. He feels the heat in the face, and keeps speaking. He feels the urge to defend, and pauses. He feels the panic rising, and slows down instead of speeding up. That is mastery. Not because the sensation disappears instantly, but because the person stops surrendering to it. This is how the body is retrained. Not by demanding calm, but by refusing to worship urgency. And this matters in every area of life. A conversation with a partner. A confrontation at work. A financial crisis. A public performance. A leadership moment. A mistake under pressure. A betrayal. A negotiation. A family emergency. In all these moments, the body may react first. That is normal. But what happens next determines your level of power. Do you let the body's first signal become your final decision? Or do you create space? That space is everything. Viktor Frankl, though not a Stoic by era, echoed a deeply Stoic truth. Between stimulus and response there is a space. And in that space is your freedom. Pressure shrinks that space for untrained people. But Stoic practice expands it. That is why emotional regulation is not a soft skill. It is strategic power. Because when others are ruled by their first reaction, you remain capable of second thought. And second thought is where wisdom lives. The person who can create even 5 extra seconds of inner space under pressure has an enormous advantage over the person who reacts instantly. 5 seconds to breathe. 5 seconds to observe. 5 seconds to question the story. 5 seconds to slow the body. 5 seconds to choose rather than obey. That can save relationships. Save careers. Save reputations. Save opportunities. Save years of regret. This is why most people fail under pressure. Not because the moment is too big, but because their first internal wave becomes their master. And the Stoic path begins by breaking that obedience. Fear makes the mind lie to you. There are moments in life when fear becomes more persuasive than reality. And when that happens, even a brilliant mind can become a liar to itself. This is one of the most dangerous things pressure does. It distorts perception. It does not just make you uncomfortable. It changes what you believe is happening. That is why fear is so powerful. Because it does not arrive announcing itself as fear. It arrives disguised as certainty. It says, "This is going to end badly. You're about to embarrass yourself. They can all see you failing. You're not ready. You're not good enough. If you make one mistake, it's over. This feeling means something is wrong. You should get out now. You can't recover from this." And under pressure, these thoughts feel true. Not because they are true, but because emotion has colored perception. This is why Stoicism places such importance on perception. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. That is not just elegant philosophy. It is practical survival. Because under pressure, the mind can take a neutral event and paint it as catastrophe. A pause in speech becomes humiliation. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A stern face becomes hostility. A difficult challenge becomes proof of incapacity. A setback becomes doom. A criticism becomes total invalidation. A single mistake becomes identity collapse. This is fear's method. It magnifies. It dramatizes. It absolutizes. It takes one moment and makes it feel eternal. One error becomes, "I always fail." One rejection becomes, "Nobody values me." One hard day becomes, "My life is falling apart." One uncomfortable sensation becomes, "I can't handle this." This is why smart people do foolish things under pressure. They are not seeing clearly. They are seeing through emotional smoke. And smoke makes every shadow look like a monster. The Stoic knows this. That is why he does not immediately trust the first thought that arises in fear. He interrogates it. He asks, "Is this true? Is this fully true? What evidence do I have? What am I assuming? What am I predicting? What am I catastrophizing? What story am I telling? What would this moment look like if I were calm?" That last question is powerful. What would this moment look like if I were calm? Because often, calm reveals how distorted fear has made the lens. If you were calm, maybe that person's silence would simply be silence. If you were calm, maybe that challenge would look difficult but manageable. If you were calm, maybe that mistake would look reparable. If you were calm, maybe that criticism would look useful. If you were calm, maybe that pressure would look like a test, not a threat. This is the difference between emotional slavery and emotional leadership. The slave believes every feeling. The leader questions the feeling before acting. Most people do not do this. They feel afraid and instantly obey the interpretation fear provides. They do not say, "I feel fear." They say, "I am in danger." That confusion changes everything. Feeling fear and being in danger are not always the same thing. And if you never learn that distinction, pressure will always control you. Because the body can create fear in moments of growth. Before the speech. Before the confrontation. Before the launch. Before the leap. Before the boundary. Before the confession. Before the performance. Before the truth. Fear often appears right at the doorway of expansion. So if you interpret fear as a stop sign, you will spend your life retreating from your own evolution. This is tragic. Because many people think fear is protecting them. But often, fear is simply protecting the old self. The smaller self. The familiar self. The self that wants certainty, approval, safety, and control. But the Stoic does not worship familiarity. He asks, "Is this fear warning me of real danger? Or merely resisting discomfort?" That question can change your destiny. Because not all fear is wisdom. Sometimes fear is laziness in armor. Sometimes fear is ego in disguise. Sometimes fear is old conditioning pretending to be truth. And if you do not challenge it, you will live inside its story. That is why emotional discipline matters more than raw intelligence. A highly intelligent person with no emotional discipline can still destroy their own opportunities. They can overreact in conflict. They can self-sabotage under stress. They can speak rashly in anger. They can retreat in fear. They can spiral in uncertainty. They can collapse under judgment. Meanwhile, a moderately gifted person with strong emotional governance can outperform them consistently. Why? Because clarity under pressure beats brilliance in comfort. Always. Panic is not just fear. Panic is fear without perspective. It is fear that has accelerated so quickly that the mind loses proportion. And when panic takes hold, something dangerous happens. Your world becomes smaller. Not physically. Psychologically. Your options shrink. Your imagination shrinks. Your patience shrinks. Your logic shrinks. Your memory shrinks. Your tolerance shrinks. Your ability to think long-term shrinks. All that remains is immediate relief. That is why people in panic make terrible decisions. They are no longer asking, "What is wise?" They are asking, "How do I stop feeling this right now?" And that question is expensive. Because the fastest way to stop feeling intense discomfort is not always the best way to protect your future. A person panics in an argument and says something cruel. A person panics in business and makes a desperate move. A person panics in fear and quits too early. A person panics in shame and lies. A person panics in uncertainty and settles. A person panics in loneliness and returns to what destroys them. A person panics in pressure and abandons discipline. In each case, the goal is the same: immediate relief. But immediate relief often creates delayed suffering. This is one of the most powerful Stoic insights you can ever understand. What calms you fastest is not always what serves you best. Read that again. Because most people are addicted to immediate emotional relief. They want the pressure gone, the tension gone, the discomfort gone, the uncertainty gone, the awkwardness gone, the shame gone. So they choose whatever action removes the feeling quickly. They lash out. They run away. They numb. They justify. They over-explain. They beg. They lie. They submit. They distract. They abandon the path. And for a moment, they feel better. But that better is often false peace. Because they did not solve the deeper issue. They simply escaped the sensation. The Stoic refuses this trap. He understands that panic is a temporary state, not a trustworthy guide. He does not make permanent decisions inside temporary storms. That sentence alone can save a life. Do not make permanent decisions inside temporary storms. When panic hits, the mind becomes dramatic. It says, "This is unbearable. This will never end. I have to fix this now. I can't sit with this. I must act immediately." But the Stoic asks, is urgency real or emotional? That is a powerful distinction. Sometimes action is necessary. But many times, what feels urgent is simply nervous system overload. The pressure inside is screaming. And the untrained person mistakes that scream for wisdom. This is why breathing matters. This is why slowing the body matters. This is why silence matters. This is why pausing matters. Because panic thrives in speed. It wants fast conclusions, fast reactions, fast escape, fast relief. The Stoic introduces deliberate slowness. A slower breath. A slower tone. A slower response. A slower decision. A slower interpretation. This does not mean passivity. It means reclaiming command. A person who can slow themselves under pressure becomes far more dangerous than the one who rushes. Because rushing often serves fear. Slowness often serves reason. Watch powerful people in crisis. The truly dangerous ones are rarely frantic. They do not move like prey. They do not speak like panic owns them. They may feel the internal storm. But outwardly, they create order. That is not accidental. That is training. And you can train it too. When panic rises, do not argue with the entire storm at once. Do something simpler. Anchor. Feel your feet. Relax your jaw. Drop your shoulders. Exhale longer than you inhale. Name 5 things you see. Slow your speech. Delay the text. Step away from the send button. Take one walk around the room. Wait before answering. Drink water. Sit down before deciding. These small acts sound ordinary. But under pressure, they are acts of war. They interrupt escalation. They widen the space between feeling and action. They restore enough order for reason to re-enter. That is all you need at first. Not total peace. Just enough space for wisdom to breathe. Because once panic is no longer driving the car, you can choose differently. And one wise choice in a storm can alter the entire outcome. Not all emotional hijacking looks like anxiety. Sometimes it looks like force. Sharp words. Raised voice. Cold withdrawal. Aggressive certainty. Impulsive confrontation. Dominating behavior. Punishing silence. People often mistake this for strength. But very often, it is fear wearing armor. This is especially important because many people fail under pressure not by collapsing inward, but by exploding outward. They become reactive. And reactive power is unstable power. A person feels disrespected and lashes out. A person feels exposed and becomes controlling. A person feels criticized and attacks. A person feels ashamed and blames. A person feels insecure and becomes arrogant. A person feels cornered and turns cruel. From the outside, it may look like confidence. But from the inside, it is often emotional panic trying to regain control. This is why Stoicism is so misunderstood. People think Stoicism means suppressing emotion. No. It means refusing to become possessed by emotion. That includes anger. Seneca wrote extensively about anger because he knew it was one of the fastest ways to make a fool of a capable person. Anger creates the illusion of power. It feels energizing. It feels righteous. It feels clear. But often, it is clarity corrupted by heat. It narrows perspective. It makes you overconfident in the moment. It convinces you that your current impulse is justice. And then later, when the body calms, you see the damage. The text you should not have sent. The words you should not have used. The opportunity you destroyed. The relationship you wounded. The authority you weakened. The respect you lost. The version of yourself you betrayed. This is why anger under pressure is so dangerous. It feels like action. But often, it is just unprocessed fear moving at speed. Fear of disrespect. Fear of rejection. Fear of being powerless. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. Fear of being diminished. And because fear feels vulnerable, the ego converts it into anger. Why? Because anger feels stronger. It feels less humiliating than admitting hurt. It feels more commanding than admitting uncertainty. It feels safer than admitting insecurity. But strength built on disguised fear is brittle. Under real pressure, it cracks. The Stoic does not say, "Never feel anger." He says, "Do not let anger make decisions." That is different. You can feel the heat. But you do not let the heat rule. You can notice the surge. But you do not obey it. You can feel the insult. But you do not become the insult's servant. This requires immense discipline. Because anger wants immediacy. It wants to strike now. Correct now. Punish now. Prove now. Defend now. The Stoic introduces delay. And delay is one of the most powerful weapons against emotional hijacking. A delayed response can save a reputation. A delayed message can save a relationship. A delayed reaction can save a career. A delayed confrontation can save years of regret. Delay is not weakness. It is strategic restraint. The weak react because they cannot bear the sensation. The strong can contain it without leaking it everywhere. That is power. And under pressure, containment matters more than intensity. Because anyone can be intense. Few can remain governed. There is a special kind of suffering reserved for intelligent people who cannot govern themselves. because they know enough to see what they should do, but not enough to consistently do it under pressure. This creates a painful inner split. They understand principles. They can give advice. They can analyze deeply. They can explain human behavior. They can predict outcomes. They can see patterns. But when the emotional storm comes, they still betray themselves. This creates shame. Because it feels like, I know better, so why do I keep doing worse? The answer is brutal but freeing. Knowledge is not mastery. Understanding is not embodiment. Insight is not discipline. Awareness is not regulation. Many people collect wisdom like decoration. Quotes, books, podcasts, videos, philosophy, concepts. But under pressure, decoration burns. Only training remains. This is why the Stoics did not treat philosophy as entertainment. They treated it as practice. A way of living. A way of breathing. A way of interpreting. A way of restraining. A way of enduring. A way of governing the self. Because a person can be intellectually sophisticated and emotionally primitive. And under pressure, the primitive layer often wins. This is why some very smart people keep repeating destructive patterns. They know the lesson, but they have not trained the nervous system to live it. They know they should pause, but they react. They know they should detach, but they cling. They know they should breathe, but they spiral. They know they should set boundaries, but they people please. They know they should let go, but they obsess. They know they should remain calm, but they collapse. This is not hypocrisy. It is lack of integration. And integration requires repetition. You do not become emotionally disciplined by understanding one idea. You become emotionally disciplined by practicing one idea 1,000 times. That is what most people refuse. They want transformation without repetition. They want calm without training. They want composure without exposure. They want self-mastery without self-confrontation. That is fantasy. The Stoic path is less glamorous, but far more real. Daily reflection. Daily restraint. Daily discomfort. Daily correction. Daily observation. Daily recovery. Daily return to center. That is how intelligence becomes power. Not when it is spoken. When it is embodied. So how do you stop emotions from hijacking intelligence under pressure? Not by becoming emotionless. Not by pretending you do not care. Not by forcing false calm. But by building a process. A repeatable inner method. A Stoic sequence. When pressure hits, remember this. 1. Notice the activation. Say internally, I am activated. Not, I am doomed. This separates sensation from identity. 2. Name the emotion accurately. Is it fear? Shame? Anger? Panic? Embarrassment? Urgency? Insecurity? Naming reduces confusion. What is vague feels overwhelming. What is named becomes workable. 3. Slow the body. Long exhale. Relax the jaw. Drop the shoulders. Unclench the hands. Reduce movement speed. A calmer body gives reason a better chance. 4. Question the story. Ask, what am I assuming? What am I predicting? What if this is discomfort, not danger? What would this look like if I were calm? This interrupts fear's lies. 5. Delay impulsive action. Do not send the message. Do not answer instantly. Do not decide in panic. Do not retaliate in anger. Do not confess defeat while overwhelmed. Delay is dignity. 6. Return to principle. Ask, what is in my control? What is the next right action? What response aligns with my values? What would the strongest version of me do here? This shifts you from emotion to character. 7. Accept discomfort without worshipping it. You may still feel bad. That is fine. The goal is not instant comfort. The goal is clean action. This is where most people fail. They think if discomfort remains, the method is not working. No. If discomfort remains but you act wisely anyway, the method is working perfectly. That is Stoic victory. Most people fail under pressure because they mistake emotion for truth. They feel fear and call it danger. They feel panic and call it urgency. They feel anger and call it strength. They feel shame and call it identity. They feel discomfort and call it incapacity. And because they believe the emotion completely, their intelligence is overruled. But the Stoic sees deeper. He knows emotions are real, but not always reliable. He knows the body may react, but reaction is not destiny. He knows fear may speak, but fear does not get final authority. He knows panic may rise, but panic does not deserve permanent decisions. He knows anger may surge, but anger is not wisdom. And because he knows this, he becomes rare. He can remain thoughtful when others become impulsive. He can remain steady when others become frantic. He can remain strategic when others become emotional. He can remain grounded when others become dramatic. He can remain powerful when others become reactive. This is the advantage that changes everything. Not merely intelligence, but intelligence protected from emotional hijacking. That is what makes a person formidable under pressure. There is a truth most people never want to hear. Pressure does not create weakness. Pressure reveals it. The storm did not make the house fragile. The storm only showed what was already cracked. And this is why so many people fail the moment life becomes difficult. Not because they are cursed. Not because they are stupid. Not because they are incapable. But because they have spent their entire lives training for comfort, and almost no time training for reality. The Stoics understood this better than most people alive today. They knew that life would test every human being. Not once, not twice, but again and again. And they also knew something dangerous. If your mind is undisciplined, pressure becomes your master. But if your mind is trained, pressure becomes your proving ground. That is the difference. The average person sees pressure as punishment. The Stoic sees pressure as revelation. The average person says, "Why is this happening to me?" The Stoic says, "What is this situation teaching me about myself?" This is why Stoicism is not just philosophy. It is survival. It is the art of staying steady when the world around you becomes unstable. Because in moments of pressure, your intelligence matters less than your conditioning. Your dreams matter less than your habits. Your intentions matter less than your nervous system. You may want to be calm. You may want to be disciplined. You may want to be brave. But under real pressure, you do not rise to your wishes. You fall to your level of training. And that is where most people break. The mind that has never been tested cannot be trusted. Many people think they know themselves. They say, "I'm strong. I can handle stress. I don't fold under pressure." But they only believe that because life has not yet asked for proof. Anyone can look calm in peace. Anyone can sound wise when nothing is at stake. Anyone can act confident when there is no risk. But the moment the deadline is real, the moment the rejection arrives, the moment the money runs low, the moment betrayal cuts deep, the moment the public humiliation happens, the moment failure becomes visible, everything changes. And suddenly, the person who seemed composed becomes impulsive. The person who seemed confident becomes insecure. The person who seemed brave becomes avoidant. Why? Because untested confidence is fantasy. The Stoics never trusted fantasy. They trusted what had been forged. Marcus Aurelius did not tell himself he was strong because it sounded good. He trained himself to become strong through constant self-examination, discipline, restraint, and endurance. He knew that the mind must be rehearsed before battle. If you wait until pressure arrives to build composure, you are already late. That is like learning how to swim after the ship begins to sink. This is why Stoicism teaches preparation. Not paranoia. Preparation. Prepare the mind before pain. Prepare the emotions before insult. Prepare the spirit before loss. Prepare the character before temptation. Because once pressure comes, you do not get time to negotiate with your weakness. Weakness moves quickly. It panics quickly. It reacts quickly. It justifies quickly. And if your discipline is not already present, your lower instincts will take over. That is what most people call, "I wasn't thinking." But the Stoics would call it something else. You were thinking exactly according to your training. That is hard to accept. But it is the truth. One of the saddest things in life is watching people betray their own principles when circumstances become hard. A person says they believe in honesty, until lying becomes convenient. A person says they believe in patience, until they are disrespected. A person says they believe in discipline, until they are tired. A person says they believe in faithfulness, until temptation appears. A person says they believe in courage, until fear gets expensive. This is the moment where character is measured. Not in words. Not in social media quotes. Not in public image. But in private decisions under emotional heat. Pressure strips away performance. It removes the mask. It reveals whether your values are real or decorative. And most people do not realize how much of their identity is built on decoration. They think they are disciplined because they wake up early sometimes. They think they are patient because they haven't been deeply provoked yet. They think they are loyal because they haven't been given a better offer. They think they are humble because they haven't been praised too much. They think they are calm because nothing has seriously threatened them. But pressure is merciless. It asks one question. Who are you when it hurts? That question terrifies people. Because it forces them to confront the gap between the person they imagine and the person they actually are. And this is why many people avoid pressure altogether. They avoid responsibility. They avoid commitment. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid meaningful risks. They avoid honest introspection. Because deep down, they know pressure might reveal something they do not want to see. But the Stoic does not run from this revelation. The Stoic welcomes it. Because what is exposed can be corrected. What is hidden remains dangerous. So if pressure has shown you that you are impatient, good. You do not become strong by avoiding hard moments. You become strong by meeting hard moments correctly. Not perfectly. Correctly. You do not need to never feel fear. You need to stop obeying it. You do not need to eliminate pressure. You need to stop being ruled by it. You do not need a life with no storms. You need a mind that can remain useful during storms. That is Stoic maturity. Many people think they fail under pressure because they are weak. But sometimes, what is actually collapsing is not the soul. It is the ego. And the ego is fragile. The ego wants to appear perfect. The ego wants approval. The ego wants control. The ego wants to be admired. The ego wants to avoid embarrassment. The ego wants immediate validation. So when pressure arrives, the ego starts screaming. What if I look stupid? What if they reject me? What if I lose status? What if I fail publicly? What if I'm exposed? This is why some people are not truly afraid of failure. They are afraid of wounded pride. And that fear makes them abandon opportunities, sabotage relationships, overreact to criticism, and run from necessary challenges. Stoicism attacks the ego at the root. It teaches, you are not your reputation. You are not your applause. You are not your image. You are not what people temporarily think of you. You are your choices. You are your conduct. You are your character under strain. This is why a Stoic can endure embarrassment better than most people. Because embarrassment is often just the ego losing its costume. And that feels terrible only if you were too attached to the costume. Imagine how much freer your life would become if you stopped making every difficult moment a referendum on your worth. Imagine if a mistake was just a mistake. Imagine if criticism was just information. Imagine if delay was just delay. Imagine if rejection was just redirection. Imagine if discomfort was just training. That mental shift changes everything. Because then pressure stops feeling like identity death. It starts feeling like temporary resistance. And temporary resistance can be endured. There is a reason many people today are worse at handling pressure than generations before them. Modern life has made escape easier than ever. The moment discomfort appears, people can distract themselves instantly. Phone, social media, entertainment, scrolling, validation, food, noise, endless stimulation. This constant access to escape trains the mind to avoid sustained discomfort. And what is the result? A person becomes emotionally weak without realizing it. They lose their ability to sit with tension. They lose their ability to delay gratification. They lose their ability to think clearly while uncomfortable. They lose their ability to remain present when emotions rise. They lose their ability to be alone with difficult thoughts. And then, when real pressure comes, they have no inner endurance. Because endurance is not built by constant soothing. It is built by conscious exposure to difficulty. This is why Stoic practice is so powerful in the modern age. It interrupts the addiction to escape. It teaches voluntary discomfort, silence, stillness, reflection, discipline, delayed reaction, intentional self-denial, not as punishment, but as training. The Stoics would sometimes rehearse hardship on purpose. They would fast, sleep with less comfort, wear simple clothing, reduce luxury. Not because suffering is holy, but because dependence is dangerous. If your peace depends on ideal conditions, then your peace is fragile. If your confidence depends on praise, then your confidence is rented. If your discipline depends on motivation, then your discipline is unreliable. If your emotional stability depends on comfort, then pressure will expose you. Modern life sells convenience. Stoicism builds capacity. And capacity is what survives pressure. Pressure punishes the undecided. Another reason people fail under pressure is indecision. They hesitate too long. They overthink. They delay. They keep searching for the perfect move. They wait for certainty. But pressure rarely gives certainty. It gives incomplete information, limited time, emotional noise, and consequences. So what happens? The indecisive mind freezes. It wants guarantees before action. But life does not always offer guarantees. The Stoic understands this. They know that wisdom is not the same as perfect foresight. Sometimes wisdom is simply this: choose the most honorable, rational action available, and accept the rest. That is power. The average person wants a risk-free decision. The Stoic wants a principled decision. And that distinction matters. Because risk-free decisions often do not exist. But principled decisions always do. Under pressure, you may not know what outcome will happen. But you can still know. What is honest? What is disciplined? What is courageous? What is just? What is necessary? That is enough. People fail because they confuse uncertainty with incapacity. Just because the future is unclear does not mean you are helpless. Just because you are nervous does not mean you are unqualified. Just because the stakes are high does not mean you should freeze. Often, the pressure is not asking for perfection. It is asking for movement. One clear step. Then another. Then another. This is how people survive impossible-looking moments. Not by solving the whole mountain in one breath, but by refusing to stop climbing. The Stoic does not ask for less pressure, only more stability. This is one of the greatest mindset shifts you can ever make. Most people spend their lives asking, how can I make life less stressful? How can I avoid pressure? How can I eliminate discomfort? But the Stoic asks a different question. How can I become more stable? That is the superior question. Because you cannot control how much pressure life sends. But you can increase your ability to remain grounded. You cannot stop every betrayal. You cannot stop every deadline. You cannot stop every loss. You cannot stop every challenge. You cannot stop every unexpected storm. But you can become the kind of person who does not shatter every time one appears. That is the path. Not a softer world. A stronger self. And that is why Stoicism remains timeless. Because it does not promise fantasy. It does not say life will become easy. It says you can become steadier. And steadiness is more valuable than ease. Ease can disappear overnight. Steadiness stays with you. Pressure can take money. Pressure can take opportunities. Pressure can take approval. Pressure can take plans. But if it cannot take your inner order, you are still dangerous. You are still capable. You are still in the fight. So if you've ever wondered why most people fail under pressure, it is not just because the pressure was too great. It is because their mind was never trained. Their values were never tested. Their emotions were never governed. Their body was never calmed. Their ego was too attached. Their comfort was too protected. And their character was too dependent on easy conditions. Pressure simply revealed what comfort had hidden. But here is the good news. What is revealed can be rebuilt. What is exposed can be strengthened. What is weak can be trained. And in the next part, we are going deeper. We will uncover the invisible habits, the mental addictions, the emotional blind spots that silently destroy performance when life becomes intense. And once you understand them, you will never look at stress the same way again.